The time has finally come. We officially have our first Bitcoin ETF that was released by ProShares and is called the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF. After months of applications filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission by various ETF providers, the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF made its market debut on the New York Stock Exchange this morning under ticker symbol BITO. Okay, great, there's a Bitcoin ETF. Why should we care? Who is this even for? As an individual investor, is this something that I should invest in? Ravi, doesn't this ETF trade future contracts? How does that even work? Well, if you stay tuned, I will go over everything you need to know about this new ETF. But if you're just here for the quick and dirty, as a retail investor like myself, I wouldn't touch this ETF. I'd much rather own actual Bitcoin, but there are some nuances to that statement and some compelling reasons to own this ETF, which I'll cover in this video. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the BITO business with me, Ravi Wadan. Now, among other things, I made this channel with the genuine intention of helping you save, invest, and grow your money and increase financial literacy across the world. So if you could do me a quick favor and hit that like and subscribe button, it would be so awesome. The ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF literally went public this morning, a few hours ago, and as of right now, it's up over 3% and trading at $40.87 a share. If we take a look at the fund fact sheet, we can see the fund's objective, which reads, the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF seeks to provide capital appreciation. The About the Fund section reads, the ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF is the first US Bitcoin-linked ETF designed to provide investment results that generally correspond to the performance of Bitcoin. The fund seeks to provide capital appreciation primarily through managed exposure to Bitcoin futures contracts. The fund does not invest directly in Bitcoin. Now, as you can see, it says clearly that this fund does not invest directly in Bitcoin. Furthermore, the fine print goes on to say that the price and performance of Bitcoin futures should be expected to differ from the current spot price of Bitcoin. These differences could be significant. Well, if we're not buying Bitcoin, then what are we buying? Okay, I think this is the most important part of this video because I think it's really important for everyone to understand that you are not, and I repeat, not buying actual Bitcoin when you buy this new ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF. A Bitcoin futures ETF like this one tracks Bitcoin prices through futures contracts traded at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, also known as the CME. Now, in a nutshell, futures contracts speculate on the future price of Bitcoin rather than the current or spot price of the cryptocurrency itself. And as a result of that, the price of this ETF and the price of actual Bitcoin won't match and will not be directly correlated. So again, with this ETF, you are not getting actual Bitcoin. You are buying into an ETF where the investors who run this ETF, so in this case ProShares, are buying futures contracts that will eventually expire. So to stay invested, the investors need to sell the expiring contracts for later dated contracts. And if these investors think the price of Bitcoin is going to rise, then the later dated contracts are more expensive than the nearby ones or the ones that they already hold. So when ProShares or the investors running this fund go to sell the cheaper expiring contracts for more expensive ones, they lose money. And that's obviously the exact opposite of what you want to do. You want to buy low and sell high, not sell low and buy high. And if you are a long-term investor, the underlying costs of managing an ETF like this will really add up when investors roll over contracts from expiring ones to future dated ones. Essentially, that means that the price of this ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF and others like it that will eventually be released could trade at a premium during a bull market, or they could trade at a discount during a bear market. I personally don't like that, especially when you can just go and buy real Bitcoin at the spot price. Well then, who is this ETF made for? In a nutshell, I think there are two main groups of investors that this ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF is designed for. It's designed mainly for institutional investors and a certain group of retail investors. But let me be honest, this product is definitely catered towards institutional investors that otherwise would not have access or wouldn't be able to gain exposure to Bitcoin because of regulatory reasons. Unlike buying Bitcoin directly, this ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF is listed on the New York Stock Exchange and has been approved by the SEC. And due to the fact that this trades on the New York Stock Exchange and has been approved by the SEC, means that this is literally one of the only ways that most institutional investors can get exposure to Bitcoin. So generally, this product, at least in my eyes, is certainly built for institutional investors. Now, I do think that retail investors could invest into this ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF, but only if they don't want to learn how to actually buy Bitcoin itself, or if they are concerned that most Bitcoin exchanges are unregulated. Michael Sapir, the CEO of ProShares, said in a recent interview that the ProShares fund will provide exposure to cryptocurrency to investors who have a brokerage account but do not desire to go through the hassle and learning curve of establishing another account with a cryptocurrency provider, or are concerned that these providers may be unregulated and subject to security risks. I couldn't have said it any better than the CEO of ProShares himself. Now, this fund really only appeals to you if you already have like a TD Ameritrade or a Fidelity account, and you just can't be bothered to open a Coinbase or a Gemini account or any other crypto exchange account that offers spot Bitcoin. I think it also appeals to certain individual investors that are concerned about cryptocurrency exchanges not being regulated. Again, unless you fall into one of the categories of being an institutional investor, or you just can't be bothered learning how to buy spot Bitcoin, don't bother buying this ETF. The best way to get exposure to Bitcoin is to actually buy Bitcoin, not a futures ETF like this one that ProShares is offering. Personally, I do not think that individual investors like you and I need to buy this Bitcoin Strategy ETF. I mean, when you think about what futures contracts are typically used for, they are typically used for commodities like oil or livestock or even things like corn. And that makes sense because you can't store things like oil or livestock or corn. But unlike oil, livestock, and corn, Bitcoin is a digital commodity or a digital asset, and storing it is extremely easy. So why would you buy futures contracts on something that you can store in a digital wallet? And why would you buy futures contracts on Bitcoin via an ETF when you can go to Coinbase, Gemini, BlockFi, SoFi, or even Robinhood and get exposure to Bitcoin by buying actual Bitcoin? Bitcoin doesn't take up any physical space. It's really easy to buy and to store. So why would you pay an ETF provider unnecessary fees for a product that doesn't even track the price of Bitcoin? Also, when you buy Bitcoin from a cryptocurrency provider like Coinbase or Gemini, you can earn interest on it, you can use it to buy things, or you can just hold on to it for as long as you'd like by only paying a one-time transaction fee. And with this Bitcoin Strategy ETF, you can't do any of those things. So should you buy this ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF? My answer is no. Do not buy this ETF. In terms of my final thoughts, I think I've made it pretty clear in terms of how I feel about this new ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF. The only reason you would use this ETF is if you're an institutional investor and can only buy regulated products sold on an exchange like the New York Stock Exchange, or if you can't be bothered with the learning curve of learning how to buy a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin from the plethora of exchanges out there. The fees that are associated with this ETF and the fact that this ETF buys futures contracts don't make it appealing at all. I mean, why would you buy futures contracts on a digital asset? Now, I can understand if you're buying livestock or corn or oil, but to get exposure to a digital asset like Bitcoin, you don't need to trade it via a futures contract. But if you guys want to see a video on safe and effective ways to buy actual spot Bitcoin, let me know in the comments section below. I think that will be a helpful video for my audience. But on a positive note, I do have to say that seeing products like this one being approved and not being shot down by regulatory bodies of the United States really is a step in the right direction. Now, there are already 3 or 4 other ETFs like this ProShares offering that are in the pipeline that should be hitting exchanges in the next couple of months. So that's always a good thing to see and a good sign for the future of Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call it a video. I hope this video was informative, and I hope I answered a lot of questions that you may have had about this ProShares Bitcoin Strategy ETF. If you haven't already, please remember to hit that subscribe button, because I'm creating content like this multiple times a week that is intended to help you out tremendously. And please remember to hit that like button, because that's what the YouTube algorithm is all about these days. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time.